serious? What would you not have believed had you not seen it with your own eyes? I saw a cat sleeping on the back of a woolly sheep. It was on a small farm belonging to friends of my parents. The sheep stood perfectly still in its stall as the cat slept peacefully on its warm back. Later, the farmer told me that the sheep and cat were friends and that the cat slept on the sheep's back regularly on cold days. My mom tells a lot of stories about her days working as a backup singer in the early 70s. She had talked a few times about knowing a particular musician back then. And I just kind of was, okay mom, thinking maybe she got called in once to do some vocals, and that was it. So one day I found one of this artist's albums had been reissued on CD. Picked it up cheap at a local music store, thinking my mom would like it as it's one I hadn't seen in her collection. She tore off the cellophane, and inside on the liner notes, there are photos of the band from around the time the album had been recorded back in 1970. Right there on the 5/6 page is a picture of my mom sitting on a bar stool in the recording studio. I was sitting in a hot tub in the middle of a perfect, quiet, cloudless night. Just happened to be looking up at the stars. I noticed a few stars disappear for a second, then a few more. I kept following these disappearing stars until I noticed a black triangle object moving across the sky. It was actually darker than the sky, which is why I could see it. It was huge, moving very fast, and made absolutely no noise. Followed it across the sky until it went out of sight. People I tell still give me that look as if I am making it up. I saw our llama effortlessly hop over our 6-foot fence, walk across the yard, and hop another 6-foot fence to be with his cow friends. As a teen, my friends said nonchalantly that his room was haunted. I was like, sure. One day we were sitting on his floor assembling a model and his door just opened. I was like, huh? And when I turned to look, it suddenly closed shut. This repeated about 4 times, and it really started to freak me out. And no, there was no sibling sitting on the other side with a piece of string or such playing a prank. Other weird stuff would happen, like one day one of his windows wouldn't open, even though it was unlocked, so I opened the adjacent one. After we left and came back, the window I couldn't open was open, and the other was shut. After anything weird like that, my friend would just say, yeah, I told you. Went to pick up a cat that was abandoned, and that the sweet lady who had tried to rescue him couldn't keep. The entire visit, lasting only 5 minutes, is the fakest thing I've ever heard, and I would never believe any of it. It all truly happened. First of all, as my family and I walked up to the house, there was a little kid on a tricycle who stopped suddenly, peered at us and said, "You here for the cat?" We said yes, and he looked at us solemnly and emphatically said, "That cat's mean," and tricycled off. Stage properly set, we went to the door. Note that the lady who had the cat had told us that the reason she couldn't keep him was because he didn't get along with her dogs. That did not prepare us for the 2 little dogs huddling by this woman's legs when she opened the door. These dogs looked like they had seen hell and somehow descended to an even greater level of torment and dreamed of returning to hell. They didn't move unless she did, as if direct physical contact with her was their only lifeline. The woman looked flustered and apologized to us. She said she couldn't catch the cat, she'd been trying, and all she could manage was trapping him in the garage. She said she hoped we could catch him in there, but she wasn't sure we'd be able to. We proceeded to the garage, all 5 of us, and rapidly entered the garage, keeping the window of door open for cat escape as short as possible. We do not see the cat, but the lady assures us he's trapped in here. My dad, just to prepare, opens the door of the cat carrier we brought and sets it on the floor. We're all looking at each other, unsure where to start. The cat promptly emerges. He's enormous, scarred, and chubby. He saunters out from under some stuff with total nonchalant confidence, wins between all of my family's legs, ignoring the woman who had been taking care of him for the past month. Mind you, walks right into the cat carrier, turns, and sits down. He waits patiently for my dad to close the door. We awkwardly say thanks to the slack-jawed woman, and we take him home. The epilogue is that we get back to our house and our 4 65 to 100-pound dogs. We place the carrier so the cat has some space, then open the door, prepared to wait for him to cautiously emerge and get comfortable. This does not happen. Instead, he immediately leaves the carrier, takes one look around, and throws himself at our dogs. He's hissing and swatting and drives them all, terrified, into a corner. He beats on them a little longer for good measure, until they're cowering and whimpering. Then he goes directly to the main bedroom bed, lays square in the middle and curls up. I swear he was smirking. Edit. In hindsight, after replying to some people below, the cat and his life were entirely unbelievable from start to finish. Edit 2. His name was Bubba. Thanks for asking about him, guys. He was a beautiful little shit, and I miss him often. Happy to share his incredible legacy. I saw a pigeon eat a grasshopper, and it had a mean face as it was attacking him. It was like if you had a picture of a pigeon and then, unlike Microsoft Paint or some shit, you put a black line for his eyebrow and you tilt it so he looks mean. You know what I'm saying? That's what I saw. A mean-ass pigeon eating a grasshopper. Back in my online pokering days about a decade ago, I pulled pocket aces in 3 consecutive hands. The odds of that happening are 10,648,001. I lost 2 out of the 3 hands. Yakuza in their underpants blowing whistles and riding golden shrines through the streets of Tokyo. I was visiting relatives in Pakistan around 25 years ago. I was born raised in the UK, and we went to a friend of my dad's house. He was quite well-to-do, and he mentioned a traveling seer was in the village, and he'd arranged for him to come and meet us all. You don't get many of those in northwest London. Now I thought this was going to be entertaining and I'd be able to see behind a veil. I was looking forward to it. We made him welcome, as is the culture in the NWFP. You will never leave a person's home hungry even if you wanted to. It's a kind of aggressive hospitality. After food we retired outside. It was night by this time as we all sat on the wooden cot beds, and he began his voyage. One of his skills was to be able to travel, telepathically, to your home. He began his voyage from the point of view of my cousin and told us the journey back to his home in the city of Peshawar, which was some distance away. Not too amazing, you think. Anyone who had traveled around would be familiar with the route. Then he went into my cousin's home and talked about seeing 2 parrots. This is getting a bit weird now. My mind's thinking someone must have told him, Occam's razor, let's put that down to good luck or intel, nothing to see here. Then he said one of the birds was ill. I looked at my cousin and he nodded. No biggie, birds get ill too. I'm sure there's a rational explanation. Then he turned his attention to me. I should explain here that this man was nomadic, illiterate, slightly disheveled and very humble and not flashy at all, very quietly spoken and shy. He held my gaze and my blood went ice cold. I've never experienced anything of the like before or since. He said I've come very far, then he went on my journey. He took a flight back to London, and from there to my home, passing landmarks, no, not the ones on TV, not Big Ben or St. Paul's, I mean things like Hoover Building. He said he saw a big building with green lights and the offices at the end of my street, with a fin-like structure. This was very, very specific. He drew it in the dust on the ground. No one else present would have known about this building. Then he went into my house, and by now my Western school of pessimism was straining at the bit, and I was feeling scared, intruded upon, but there was no malice. I was just not expecting this. Everyone could tell from my expression that I was seeing what they already knew. He asked my permission to enter my home, and I swear this is the truth. He talked about a fish-shaped bowl in the kitchen, a horrible kitsch thing, and he drew it, and that was enough. I was like, please stop now. To be honest, I was terrified, can't explain it. Fear had subsumed me. This was so outside of my worldview I was unable to process. He had to mentally come back to close his reading. So that was when I was in my early 20s and I still think about it. All the time. I saw a cow on the ground using its back leg to scratch its ear like a dog. Weird. My horse when he bounced a gate off to get to the other pasture. He was halfway across the down gate when we yelled at him, Chansey, get over here. He actually turned around and came back in the hole while stomping his beat tantrum style. We were shocked. It was pretty funny to see. I have witnessed a lot with animals. I have seen a horse use a blunt stick stuck in the ground to scratch inside his foreskin. I have seen jaguars try to convince trainers the meat was stuck in the food chute, so they would put their hands in reach. This was a game. One of my favorites was watching a male silverback gorilla push a flower pot in his cage over towards a keeper. Stand on it and hold up his arms to make himself look as big as he could. He wanted us gone and the keeper had her back to the bars. He went from subtle to bucket of bricks in 10 minutes. One summer I went on a hiking trip with a couple friends. One friend is a literal mountain man. He hunts, goes fishing, carves stuff out of wood, that whole thing. Basically, he's the guy you want with you if you ever get lost in the wilderness. Anyway, we make it to our camping spot after about 6 hours, and we decide to dump our gear and hike up a nearby mountain for a better view. Keep in mind this mountain is steep. We are on our hands and knees climbing up using the grass to hold on to. About halfway up we see a bunch of grouse hiding in the bushes below us. We all spend a couple minutes seeing if we can caveman it and catch us some dinner by trying to hit the grouse with rocks. Obviously, we suck at throwing rocks and don't get anywhere. Then Mountain Man comes up. He has, in his hands, a rock about the size of a basketball. He looks below and gives the rock a small toss. That's when I saw it. The rock drops below, hits one bird that was hiding in a bush, bounces in the air, then proceeds to hit another bird on its second bounce. I didn't believe he hit two birds until he went down and picked both of them up with a surprised face. I know it was probably luck, but he's the only person I've ever heard of actually killing two birds with one stone. That night we cooked the grouse with some seasonings we had and went to bed with full bellies. TLDR. Friend killed two birds with one stone. About 7 years ago I worked as a tutor in the late afternoon and evening for a company in a really rich area. We parked in a multi-story garage that by the time we left was open, so we never had to pay. We were always parked by really expensive BMWs, Mercedes, etc. since we arrived a few hours before 5 p.m. My car was in the shop one time, so I took my then boyfriend's 1989 Chevy Silverado, K1500 back then, to work and parked in the garage. When I came out about 5 hours later, I was shocked to see the truck in a different parking spot, the exact opposite one it was in. As I approached it, it was perfectly between the lines of the new spot, and the only off thing was that the tailgate was pressed against the chain link fence that was between the ramp and edge that was separating the levels. This was on a slope and not flat. Nothing looked amiss and no other car was best to it, but I never would back into a spot in this garage anyway, and I never parked on that side. I get in and the truck is in reverse, not park, steering wheel shifter. It wasn't moving when I got out to go to work, but eventually this gigantic rusted-out truck backed into a, luckily, empty spot on its own, perfectly between the lines, without hitting any parked or moving vehicles in this garage. After that, I always made sure it was in park, as it would sometimes stick, and you'd have to push hard to get it into park, this event being the first time I realized it. One time I was cleaning my dog's eye gunk out with a soft paper towel, and after we're done doing that he goes fucking nuts for some reason. He's running around the living room, being all cute and crazy, whatever. He manages to get a hold of the paper towel I was still holding, does the thing where he shakes it a little bit, opens his mouth and it's gone. He just fucking inhaled it. Like 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. It was like 11 at night and me and my mom were looking at each other and wondering if it was real. And yes, he was okay afterwards. Never had any tummy problems and he's still a healthy boy. I still don't know how he ate it that fast. It was fucking astonishing. Our Philippines president siding with the Chinese nationals who rammed the boat of sleeping Filipino fishermen and left them to drown inside REs. PH president and his disciples tried to paint the fishermen as part of some destabilization scheme against the current administration. My partner had a serious head injury and needed a large part of his skull removed. He made a slow recovery and after 10 months had just reached the stage that he could leave the flat by himself, but he remained weak on his right side. Even after 10 months, he could not use a knife and fork, though he could lift the knife, he could not cut with it, and had long-term memory problems, particularly with times and dates. He had an operation to put a replacement skull piece in. His ability with time was immediately restored the moment he came round from the anesthetic. He came home with me 3 days later. We had fish and chips when we got back, and we were halfway through the meal before I realized that he was using the knife and fork as if he'd never stopped. 6 weeks later we saw the consultant. I explained excitedly how remarkable his recovery had been. The consultant sat back in his chair and drawled. Yes, there are people who deny that happens. But then there are people who deny global warming. I wasn't sure whether to punch him or hug him. I have a perfect story for this. So my friends and I just reached the age to be able to go bridge jumping. Not like suicide, but at a safe height into deep enough water. My friend, Danny, jumped off the bridge, did a backflip, goes underwater for 15 seconds or so, and then comes up holding a striped bass. Coolest kid I've ever met. About 6 or 7 years ago I worked as a camp counselor in Fishkill, New York. Our cabins were in a very isolated area pretty deep in the woods. We always put the kids to bed around 10 p.m. and around 11 I would usually sneak out to meet this girl that also worked there, but was in an all-girls cabin about a quarter mile down the main path. I would always walk off to the side of the path so I wouldn't be seen. One night something I will never forget happened. As I was walking through the woods I heard rustling in a bush near me. I obviously investigated because I was dumb and curious, and when I walked over this solid black little humanoid thing jumped out and looked at me. It was about 2 to 3 feet tall, but had perfect human proportions. I stared at it for a second trying to figure out WTF I was looking at, and it bolted, ran away on 2 legs, just like a human would, back into the woods. I couldn't make out any features because how dark it was, but this thing was incredibly fast, like superhuman or animal fast. I thought maybe it could have been one of our kids that snuck out, but that didn't make any sense either. All our kids were age 14 to 17, and this thing was toddler size at best. I really have no effing idea what I saw that night, but a lot of other strange stuff happened in those woods as well. Clarifying that it sprinted away on 2 legs, not 4. That my best friend would try and get my boyfriend to cheat on me with her. It's been 2 years and I still get anxious about it. I watched an 8-year boy overpower and throw off 6 grown men, 2 of whom were strength coaches for a state university. He was about 70 pounds. They literally could not contain him. He had started the thing by freaking out and breaking windows, chairs, desks, hitting kids, etc. Craziest thing I've seen. I don't necessarily believe in demon possession, but that was superhuman and really disturbing to watch. A camel hanging out at the Great Wall of China in the middle of January. It was my first time in China, it was my first time seeing a camel in person, and all around I was confused as to what a camel was doing just hanging out there. Then again, maybe the camel was confused as to why I was there as well, so I guess we are even. A football field-sized rectangle-shaped craft silently gliding across the night sky. The President of the United States stating in a public speech that airports were taken during the American Revolutionary War. That's just straight out of a satirical cartoon comedy. Potato sundae. It's ice cream shaped like a potato. I ordered it, my girlfriend was furious at me that we were having a freaking potato for dessert. Suddenly we realized that ain't no potato, but it's ice cream. Goats in a tree when we were driving up a mountain in Greece. Dosing or witching or whatever the hell you call it. People take 2 thin metal rods and hold them out parallel to the ground and walk in a straight line. When they walk over a buried pipe or something, the rods will cross. It's stupid. It has no basis in science. I have never read a valid explanation whatsoever. It makes no sense. But goddammit, I've seen it work way too often to be a coincidence. Dozens of times, I've seen professional utility locators try and fail to locate a buried pipe with metal detectors and ground-penetrating radar, only to come out and find it using 2 metal sticks and be accurate within less than 1 foot. I still don't fully believe that it works. I don't know what to think.